Welcome back to the Fire Forge Leader podcast. Today I picked up my phone and I saw these reports of Princeton students disrupting a Memorial Day parade. And at first I thought to myself, how frickin' ridiculous is that? These students were out there blocking the road. They locked arms in protest and were yelling pro-Palestinian chants. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for people getting involved. But in this instant, I was angry. And you're probably wondering why I'd be so angry. And the answer is simply this. Because these people were disrupting a Memorial Day parade. A parade that honors all the brave men and women who have fought and died for our freedoms we have in this great country. One of those freedoms being the freedom to be able to protest. Now, the thing that makes me most aggravated about this is that as I look around, I don't see us, the generation that came before, passing information down to the next generation. I personally believe that people are absolutely ignorant about Memorial Day and its true meaning. And further, I think that we as parents have failed our children drastically because we have not educated them well. Now, most people generally see this holiday, and I use that term loosely, as simply a paid day off, an extra day off, a 3-day weekend. And they use it for an extra camping day to get drunk or do whatever. And we're going to get into all that here in a minute. But until then, once again, I am Steve Baumgartner, your host, and my mission here today and the mission of this podcast is to simply serve you, the listener, through providing tools, resources, and knowledge around leadership strategies on 3 primary battlefronts. Those battlefronts are simply in the workplace, out in the community, and most importantly, with your family. Now let's get to work.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forge Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in the Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Yesterday, my 7-year-old daughter asked me why we observe Memorial Day. She did this in a very innocent way, but she said something that made me think, man, we're not doing a good enough job with our youth. She asked me, she said this, she said that people die every day. Why is Memorial Day so different? And I use this as an opportunity to educate my daughter. It gave me the chance where I pulled up a photo of a mother and a child sitting at a grave, a military grave, both obviously grieving for this lost husband and father. I then went on to talk to my 7-year-old daughter about how some men and women give everything, including their life, for our freedom. And then I went on to talk about what it's like to live in the United States versus some other countries. I talked about how, yes, there's people out there that act absolutely stupid, but they're allowed to. I talked about how, when we were talking about this, we were actually at a restaurant, and I talked about that freedom. And then I talked about other places where they stand in bread lines and where they can't talk about anything in fear of the government intrusion. Now, this conversation got pretty deep for a 7-year-old, but it was wonderful. It was a tremendously great conversation because I saw that light bulb going off inside her head. And it gave us a really good chance to reflect. And I can tell that it made a profound impact on her. So much so that since we had that discussion, she's been using that for her prayer intentions. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that I have not done a good enough job passing the information of why Memorial Day is so important on to my kids. And further, to be honest, it's a hard conversation, right? We often, as parents, try and protect our children from the harsh realities of life. You know, sometimes it's that we don't know anybody directly that was a fallen man or woman in a battle. Sometimes we don't know anybody directly who is in the military. Sometimes we just don't think about it, or we don't take the time that we need to discuss it. Whatever the case is, we need to make sure that we're having this conversation with our kids. There are many, many men and women who have lost their lives in war, who have lost their lives for us directly so that we can have the freedoms that we hold dear. Now let's talk about the history of Memorial Day a little bit. It actually started in 1868, where General Garfield had gathered up over 5,000 people to decorate over 20,000 Civil War graves. Now, the Civil War, this war claimed more American lives than any other in history. These events, you know, this decorating of the graves spread across America as a way to honor our fallen. And it was named Decoration Day from 1868 until 1971, where Congress actually established the last Monday in May as Memorial Day, what we know today as Memorial Day. And it's to recognize our fallen warriors. That is its singular purpose. It's not to light a grill. It's not to go camping. It's not to get sales on shoes. It's to recognize our fallen warriors. That is its purpose. But rather than this episode being a history lesson, I want to draw attention to the fact that we need to lead and educate our children. So let's talk about some of those things. Let's talk about some of the things that we can learn, that we can discuss with our children, looking at these fallen heroes. Let's start with the obvious one, courage and bravery. It's probably fairly easy to see how courageous people are that go off to war, that go off to these battles. But I want to let you know I've been listening to a lot of veterans on podcasts, on audiobooks, YouTube, and they often discuss how these men and women who they've known, these men and women who have given this ultimate sacrifice, that they do this with the complete knowledge that this mission may be their last, especially in recent times. Battles in Afghanistan, for example. Most of the people who deploy to the Middle East do it 2, 3, 4 times. And they continue to do that. They continue to show up. And it really gives us a chance to discuss with our children or anybody else that we mentor on times that we need to have courage in our lives and how that looks, how courage looks effectively. Not going and disrupting a Memorial Day parade, but how to do it effectively. Now, this could look something like talking to your kids about when they know that something is wrong and being able to stand up for what is right, like many of our military people do. And we can talk to them about how to utilize that courage for good rather than evil. And then there's commitment and dedication. And this is also a great topic that we can have with children. We can talk about how many of these brave men and women, they were committed to this country, to our freedoms, and keeping the U.S. full of these freedoms. They're dedicated because they know what the United States is the best thing out there. And how they are willing to take the risk to make sure that they protect what we have here in the United States. And this can be a good chance, really, to dive in and ask your children, what are some things that you would find important enough to fight for? And when I asked my daughter this question the other day, she told me Jesus. Her love for Jesus is important enough to die for. At 7 years old. But it's a good time to start these conversations. And I want to say it. It's a conversation. It's not a talk. It's not a lecture. It's a conversation with your child. Now, as I talked about earlier, we often don't have these conversations with our children. We get caught up in other things. We've forgotten ourselves. We don't want to have those tough conversations. But damn it, we need to. We need to be very intentional with it. Now, this observed holiday, once again using the word holiday very loosely, should be a very somber time when we can bring out these conversations. But we need to figure out how to do that. We need to figure out how to engage our children in these conversations. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas here real quick that you can build off from. So the easiest one, and many cities have them around America, is simply go to a Memorial Day parade or service. And ultimately, that's going to drive questions from your kids. And that's going to open the door. It's going to open the door to have these deep conversations. You can go out and visit graves. You can visit national memorials. You can get the little flags and stick up. Once again, it drives the conversation. It helps you facilitate that conversation. You can go out and do something educational. There's plenty of educational activities. You can look online for them, find things to do around Memorial Day. You can do something artwork related, and you can talk about these things. You can drive this conversation once again. So get creative. Everything should point back to one thing, and that's starting the conversation with your kids. I just suggest doing something with them so that you can also keep their attention. You can keep their attention around the focus so that you can actually finish the conversation. So this is a fairly short video. Short episode, all in all. But really, we have to do better. We have to teach our kids. We have to let them know what things like Memorial Day are all about. We have to have the hard conversations. We have to educate them to a higher level. Because what we're doing today is not working. Our kids are lost. They don't understand. And we will repeat the past. They need to understand what it takes to continue to have the freedoms that we have. So I want you to go out there and I want you to have these conversations with your children. We have 4th of July coming up. Research it beforehand if you don't understand what it's all about. Figure out something in advance so that you can engage your children better. Don't use it as just another free day off. Use it with intention. Use it for purpose. Use it to lead well in your home. So I'd like to hear your stories. Go ahead and drop them in my social media. hit me up with an email. I would love to hear your stories on how you led in this topic. All right, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. And once again, if you found value in this episode, please give it a rating and a review. Also, smash that subscribe button on whatever podcasting application you're currently listening to. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at Fireforge Leader across all the different social media platforms. Go out there and lead with intent.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.